We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome 80-20 baseball community. I'm pumped to be here this week. This week I'm flying out. Actually, in a few days, I'm flying down to spring training in Arizona. Pumped up, catch some baseball. We got the World Baseball Classic. The game is tonight, World Baseball Classic championship game. I'm liking that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the World Baseball Classic in a minute. First, I want to welcome all you coaches, youth baseball coaches, parents of youth baseball players, and baseball players. And I know there's college coaches and high school coaches and above that listen to this. But again, this is focused for youth baseball. The nice thing is baseball, by and large, works the same way at all levels, but youth baseball definitely has some differences. And it's important that we don't deviate from what works best for youth baseball. Excited for this episode. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you a Jim Valvano story. Most of you are old enough to remember Jim Valvano, the late, great basketball coach, college basketball coach. I'm going to share a story that his father and what he said to him when he was younger. And this really hits home because growing up, Jim Valvano was such a big name. If you watched ESPN in the late 80s, early 90s, Jimmy V was everywhere. Jimmy V was everywhere. And it was always such a heartwarming story, having passed away young, or at least way too young, from cancer. So I'm going to share a story that I read in a daily email that I get called The Daily Dad. I recommend that email, The Daily Dad. It's a quick read. The nice thing about The Daily Dad email that I recommend you subscribe to, I don't have any affiliation with it, but I recommend getting it. It's an easy, quick read, like I said. And the nice thing is everything that it talks about can be applied to both being a parent and a coach simultaneously, together, concurrently. Sounds like a win-win to me, which after I talk about that Daily Dad, Jim Valvano story, we're getting into habit number 4 of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Coaches series. Think win-win. Again, we're taking these habits directly from the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from Stephen Covey, the well-known famous book. We're taking those 7 habits and then we're applying them to baseball, to youth baseball, to parenting, to coaching. And I think there's some really good discussion that I'm going to share out with you to help us be better coaches. So it's win-win. We want to be win-win type of coaches. In fact, we are going to discuss, I'm going to share with you why I think it's actually never just win-win. Why I think most things that we do, if we do them right, are not just a win-win, but there are subsequent wins or residual wins that come with those initial wins. We'll get into that and we'll break it down. I think this is super interesting. So here at the 80-20 baseball community, we double down on the big difference makers while being very cognizant to only cover the small needle movers relative to their impact on the upcoming game, on players' lives, and on the team culture, the team environment. We let the goal dictate how we prioritize our practice and training time, and then we find the most efficient and streamlined ways to optimize our players' success come game time, come adulthood, and the success of our team culture and our team environment. I like to share out a message at the beginning of each podcast that resets the paradigm for all of us. The goal, what we're trying to do here, to have the most success we can with our players and our teams. If you haven't listened to the first 3 habits, go back and listen to those over the last 3 weeks. So Mookie Betts, I saw him sitting cross-legged. He was sitting cross-legged. We used to call it something different when I was young, but nevertheless, he was sitting cross-legged during the World Baseball Classic. I believe there was a pitching change, and I got no problem with this. And the reason I'm bringing this up, you're like, Coach Bo, why are you talking about Mookie Betts sitting in the outfield during a pitching change or whatnot? Because there are a lot of coaches that I know that are out there that would, or that I should say do, look to eradicate this kind of behavior or this type of thing. And what I'm saying is, don't be so rigid. Don't be too rigid with your rules. If all you have is rules for everything, they start to dilute each other. And it's also hard to build trust, rapport, and buy-in if you can't trust players to do some things, some autonomous things, some things on their own to make good decisions, but also to have some freedom. Players need to feel like they have some freedom of expression. So Mookie Betts, by the way, if I was drafting a team and I had the first pick and every player was available, available. You could make the argument that Shohei Ohtani, I call him Shotani, would be the first pick, but I would actually take Mookie Betts. And if you've listened to this show long enough, you know how highly I value the vibe, the chemistry, the team culture. Of course, Ohtani is another level. I would draft Mookie Betts number 1. That says a lot because there's a lot of great players. Judge, Trout, of course, some great players out there. But I love Mookie Betts because his vibe, his attitude, his teammates love him, and he's all around just versatile. Talk about versatility. You could put him at catcher, probably not have to teach him anything, and he'd probably be a Gold Glove catcher within a year. I'm serious. He's that good. So my thing is about the sitting cross-legged. There's a lot of coaches who would yell at their players, pick your battles. Pick and choose your battles. To me, that's not a big thing. I know there's this, you got to take a knee and you got to be all uniformed in terms of what our team does. I wouldn't say anything. If I had a player sitting cross-legged while there was a pitching change, I wouldn't say anything about it. If that player goes over in foul territory or off the field and starts socializing with friends from another team or starts doing something super goofy or climbing the foul pole, yeah, of course. You got to say something, all right? I'm not saying it should just be free reign, but if a kid just sits down cross-legged, not a big thing, you go, well, Coach Bo, why this? It's a small example of some of the other rules. You have to be careful. Pick and choose. Don't be so rigid. Be very strict and stern and firm and consistent with your core rules. And then let the kids be kids, okay? If they sit cross-legged out there, and I've played on teams, I've had coaches that I've played for teams that yelled at their outfielders for sitting down during a pitching change, much less sitting cross-legged. Let kids be kids. Pick and choose your battles. Put your energy into the core rules, the core expectations, because those in and of themselves are going to be a challenge for every coach to stay consistent with, to work through, and to build up a team around those core rules in and of themselves. And then you start trying to find all sorts of things to dictate. I highly recommend you be very careful. And before you yell at a player or just add a rule on the fly, sleep on it. If you see a kid sitting cross-legged or doing something like that, for example, don't yell out, hey, we don't do that on this team. We don't do that. All right, sleep on it. You can always come back at the next practice and say, hey, we've thought about this. I've talked with other coaches, and we've decided to implement this. Again, just be careful being too rigid. So the World Baseball Classic, what a great event. This thing just keeps getting better, and it's really just blown up this year. It feels like more than ever. Love it. Really big fan of the World Baseball Classic, and I just like this world vibe. It's crazy to see like Japan had 50 some odd percent of their TVs tuned in for the game. I think Puerto Rico had 60% of the TVs in Puerto Rico were watching. And I know we got listeners from Puerto Rico and Japan. You're talking about just massive numbers of viewers percentage-wise. In Puerto Rico, I think it was like 60% of TVs in Puerto Rico and Puerto Rico were tuned in to their game against the Dominican Republic. That's crazy. And then even in Japan, over 50% of TVs in Japan were dialed in to the Japan-Mexico game and pretty much every Japan game. It's awesome. Just really cool. Tell you what, there's a lot to learn from how they played the game. I think the game in Japan is very underrated in terms of how it's coached. They're big on fundamentals. I think they're ahead of America on a few, I wouldn't say a lot, but a few things for sure. Maybe over the course of the next year, we'll break some of those down and dive into those. Before I get to the coaching quote of the week and habit number 4, there's this email that I get, as I mentioned earlier, called the Daily Dad. I'm really not a big fan of getting a lot of emails. Now, I do love getting emails from coaches. Okay, so I have my Coach Bo 80/20 Baseball inbox, and then I have my other inbox, my iCloud inbox. And I am very, very cautious with giving that email address out. Now, to coaches like you, that my listeners I can trust, that's one thing, but just giving it out, I'm very cautious. Just trying to make sure my inbox just isn't inundated with so much stuff, just overflowing, because what I want in there is quality. Now, my 80/20 inbox, that's the first one I check. I love getting emails from all of you. That's my first one. But I'm very cautious to how much mail I'm getting because it's 80/20. What's the important stuff? And this email that I get from the Daily Dad, what I like is it's a short, very quick read, but it's got a good message every day. It sets the paradigm going into the day. And I believe you can set when you want it delivered. So I just have it set in the morning. So when I wake up in the morning, it's there and it sets my mind. It helps calibrate my mindset. It helps calibrate my viewpoint on life and what's important and prioritize what's important. It keeps the priorities, the main things, things. Speaking of 7 habits of highly effective people and coaches. So I'm going to paraphrase, read a little bit from this email. But this story of Jim Valvano, 1982-1983, he coached North Carolina State basketball to a national championship title. The Wolfpack, NC State, was a mid-ranked team that entered the NCAA tournament looking like nothing but a title contender. In other words, they didn't look like they had a chance to win the tournament. And this was back when there weren't as many upsets. There were upsets, but there weren't as many upsets. Part of that was because back then, players stuck around. So when a team got really good players, they didn't just go to the NBA. Where teams that didn't have NBA caliber players, they could keep them around. They keep them around for 3 or 4 years, and thus they can negate some of that elite basketball skill that, say, the Kentuckys and the North Carolinas have, because they can build a team. They get a group. Butler, I think of Gonzaga when they were coming up. Some teams that would get those junior and senior classes dialed in for 2-3 years, and then they would go contend. Not that they were better in terms of pure basketball skill, but they played better as a team. Back in the early 80s and before, players at all the great schools stuck around 3-4 years. I'm not sure if it was, I know it was at least 3. I'm not sure if they had to stick around for their 4th year back in 1982, but nonetheless, the email goes on to say, this article in the email, it says, it was improbable that they'd win their first 2 games. And even if they did, no one really expected them at all of having any chance against number 2 ranked Virginia. No one except Coach Valvano. He believed in his guys. He believed his guys could do it, even when his guys didn't. The rather unassuming Valvano was known for that unshakable, borderline irrational belief in himself and his teams. In his coaching career, and in his battle with cancer. In every aspect of life, he lived by a quote he heard when he was a young boy. Every single day, in every walk of life, ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things. Valvano was himself an ordinary kid with ordinary parents from an ordinary town where he received an ordinary education. Still, he did extraordinary things in his life. Valvano wasn't even out of high school when he first told his dad he had decided what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. He was going to be a college basketball coach. Told his dad, "Dad, I'm going to win a national championship." Think about how many parents out there, think about yourself. If they told you this was their goal, how would you have reacted? Remember, it's one thing if they're already a coach, having some success. This is a high school kid. It's understandable to react that way as a parent, to overprotect our kids' mental well-being so they don't get hurt. So the intention wouldn't be bad to have a reaction like, "Hey, you really sure about that? Hey, it's a really hard thing to do," or maybe you should have a backup plan or two. It's understandable to have that reaction, but that wasn't how Mr. Valvano was built, Jim Valvano's dad. A few days after Jim told his dad about his plans for the future, his dad called him into his bedroom. He said, "See that suitcase?" pointing to a suitcase in the corner of the room. Confused, Jim replied, "Yeah, what's that all about?" His dad said, "I'm packed. When you play and win that national championship, I'm going to be there. My bags are already packed." End quote. Wow. Jim would later say, "My father gave me the greatest gift anyone could ever give a person. He believed in me." And stricken with cancer that would take his life eventually, Coach Valvano won the national championship in 1983. And the email finishes up with talking about not being a minimizer. Not being a minimizer. Now, should you be careful over promising or exaggerating the levels of success that kids are going to have? Yeah, you probably shouldn't, as they say, blow smoke. But I think we got to be careful putting a governor on kids' lives. Being a minimizer. Be realistic, but maybe when we share messages with kids and talk about their goals, let's show them the belief first. Share something about it being a challenge, a path that's not just going to go smooth. It's going to be challenging, but hey, you could say something like, "That's how life is going to be no matter what. Any path you take. So you might as well go after your goal." That email hit me and literally almost brought a tear to my eye when I was reading it. Here's Jim Valvano in high school tells his dad he's going to go on and win a college basketball championship as a head coach. And his dad calls him in a few days later and says, "Hey, see that suitcase? I'm already packed for your championship game." Pretty cool. Good stuff. Definitely got to have some balance with our message to kids. We have to have some balance, some realism, but don't be a default minimizer. I guess that's probably the best way to say it. Don't be a default minimizer. You should default to having belief and showing belief in your kids and your team and your players. And then you can always add in the message or messages about the challenges they might run into. And it's not just going to be a smooth, there might be some bumps. Okay. Paint a picture of what might or would likely come their way if they do go down that path, but don't default to saying, "It can't happen, won't happen, no way, no chance." All right, let's move to the coaching quote of the week. And I'm mixing it up. The next couple weeks, the quote of the week, they're going to come from players or from a player's perspective, but we are going to use these to help coach our players. I recommend sharing these quotes with your players. In this particular case, I recommend sharing this quote with your pitchers, which might be all your players, the youth level. This quote is from, not sure if he's not really well known, Jacob DeGrom. He got a French name, DeGrom. Anyways, some of you might know who he is. Of course, I'm only kidding. Pretty much everybody knows Jake DeGrom. Jacob DeGrom. Spelled with a lowercase d. There's nothing lowercase about his game, his pitching game, and his repertoire, his talent, his skills, to say the least. He said, quote, "My approach every game is to try to keep the ball down and get ground ball outs," end quote. So Jake DeGrom, his approach is to keep the ball down. And he throws 100 miles an hour and he's got a great cutter, slider, changeup. He's got some really out-of-this-world pitches, some of the most elite pitches in the world, yet he's still going out there and trying to keep the ball down, and he does a really good job of this. A lot of people talk about his velocity, throwing 100 and having this slider that's 93 miles an hour and a changeup that's just really great, some other pitches that he mixes in there from time to time. But the reason that he dominates to the level that he dominates is because he does keep the ball down, even with his amazing stuff. What I like about this is he's not just trying to keep the ball down. I like that message from this quote. But the other part of the quote that I like is he's trying to get ground ball outs. He's not saying I'm going out there and trying to strike everybody out. So I'm trying to keep the ball down and I'm okay with getting ground ball outs. That's okay. I'm not trying to go out there and strike everybody out. I'm happy getting ground ball outs. It's a team game. You got 8 players on your team on defense, 7 of them behind you. You got the catcher working with you in front of you. Let them have some fun too. Many of you can think of that Bull Durham quote that I'm thinking about right now. Or maybe I'll bring that quote up another day. But strikeouts, good if you get them. But like Jacob DeGrom, one of the best says, my approach every game is to try to go out there and keep the ball down and get ground ball outs. I recommend sharing this message with your pitchers and say, look, this is one of the most talented pitchers in the world. And he goes out there and he tries to keep the ball down and he's good with getting ground ball outs. He's not just trying to throw it as hard as he can. He's trying to locate it. And he's not just going out there and trying to strike everybody out. He's good with getting ground ball outs. So these messages coming from the pro of pros are good to share with pitchers to get that buy-in, to help build buy-in with your players, especially a player like Jacob DeGrom, a current contemporary player that they can all relate to, or most all of them can relate to. Now, let's transition. Let's finish this week's episode strong. Habit number 4, think, win, win. What I think is most interesting about this habit, it's probably the one habit that I don't see completely eye to eye with, in that I think most things have more than 2 wins. And what do I mean by that? When things are done right by coaches, by teams, by players, I believe there are more than 2 wins that happen, 2 wins that occur, 2 people that can win. I think there's more to that many times. And here's what I mean by that. I believe there are residual winners. There's residual winning. It's a domino effect. Quality actions, things that are done right, doing things the right way. I believe there's a domino effect, a butterfly effect, residual winning. Everything we talk about here at 80/20 Baseball goes toward the goal of everybody winning, everybody involved winning. Again, we're not just talking about the scoreboard. And of course, we want to have success on the scoreboard. We want our players to have success with their baseball skills. But of course, it's much more than that. There are other key goals when it comes to youth sports. And there are many coaching styles where the coach wins. There are many coaches you may have seen, coaches you may have had when you were younger, where the coach wins in the interim, but the player loses. And eventually the coach will lose. He'll lose his team, his players. And if he doesn't lose them literally, like they don't come back and play, he will lose their respect and their buy-in, not to mention all the residual losses that come from not having a balanced approach, a win-win approach. The path of least resistance for coaches can very well be the path that leads to a quick perceived win for the coach, but a loss for the player, and maybe even a quick win for the team, but a long-term loss. So it's not a win-win, it's a win-loss. Winning in the interim can very well mean a loss down the road, depending on how we're coaching and our approach to coaching up our players and playing the game and coaching youth baseball the right way and keeping our goals always top of mind, our 3 main goals. want our players to have success as baseball players. We want them to become successful adults, successful teenagers, successful down the road. And we want our team culture to be fun. We want the environment to be fun so the players come back and keep wanting to come back. Those are our three main goals. If you don't win those goals there, then you're losing. Now, if the player doesn't get a lot better with their skills, that would be the least of my worries, although that's not going to happen if you follow 80-20 baseball. If you've been here, your players are going to get better. They're going to have more success on the scoreboard, in the batter's box, on the pitching mound, infield, outfield, base running, catching, what have you. But I know coaches when I was younger, I know coaches that didn't do anything to help players become winning adults. And to me, that's a win-loss. That's not a win-win. That's a win-loss. They won some games, probably could have won more games, but they lost the bigger picture. So here are some examples. Let's dive into some examples of win-win, of think win-win. So coach the 80-20 way, and you'll guide your players toward more success on the field and toward more success as an adult, which then has the residual effect. The residual winners, such as the community, society, all the people that kids will then go on to positively impact or affect, especially those closest to them. Winning the game of life not only has the compounding effect, it has a domino effect, a butterfly effect. The wins ripple across the family, the community, and even the world. Example 2, rules. Having core rules or expectations, standards for your players. Immediate win will be a consistent, more predictable environment for the players, a calmer, less anxious environment. And the other wins that come from that, from instilling discipline and consistently upholding expectations, are that the kids keep playing baseball. They're eager to come back next season. The parents don't have to deal with a player that comes home upset all the time after practice because the environment's terrible. They don't have to deal with those residual effects. They're dealing with a content kid, albeit not 100% of the time. It's easier for the parents and the family, so they win. The kid is happy, they're content at least, because the environment is calmer and less anxious, because there's been consistent and predictable standards and expectations, and a consistent coach, a consistent behavior from the coach on top of that. Just that consistency. So the kid wins now, the team wins now, and the kid wins later as an adult. The coach wins now, the family wins now and later. Moreover, the umpires win because they don't have to deal with spoiled, disrespectful, unconstrained players. The people that clean the field after the games are over and the teams leave, they win because your team left the dugout better than they found it. And the list of winning keeps going. That's that residual, that ripple domino effect of winning. I think it's more than just win-win. It's just win-win right now. When things are done right, it's residual. It's compounding. It's a butterfly, a domino effect, which is amazing, which should be very motivational as a coach, knowing that what you're doing now and not taking the path of least resistance now, not always taking the easiest path now as a coach, is going to have a huge effect on the world, on the community, and at a minimum on those families and inner circles of your players as they get older, which is amazing, which is huge. That effect that's amazing to think about how positive that effect can be. Another aspect of the win-win is teaching kids that it's not a win-lose world, that it's not a win-lose world. It's not a zero-sum game world. That a narcissistic, scared, greedy, selfish mindset, that's shallow thinking. And that's not a winning mindset. And it never can be a winning mindset. Kind of like negotiating. I'm not a pro expert negotiator for some huge corporation or sitting in on negotiations for big deals and things like that. But I think it's pretty obvious to anybody who understands negotiation, even on the most basic of levels, is the way to negotiate is to have both sides walking away feeling like they received a fair outcome, that they got a fair outcome, that they both won. And this attitude is great as you go out and coach your players. You can both win. Coaches can win. Players can win. Families can win. Everybody can win. Umpires can win. Everybody can win at the same time. There can be simultaneous winning, concurrent winning. The winning doesn't have to be paired with losing. And I think that's what's really great about this habit number 4, is we're shooting for that win-win. Win-win-win-win-win-win-win. Now, I'm going to share something I think is very interesting right here, and it's a different look at this. Maybe something you haven't heard before. Maybe you have. The flip side of win-win is the lose-lose approach, collective punishment, for example. Now, while I'm not a big fan of collective punishment for most things in life, in a team environment, it can be useful. Using a lose-lose approach when it comes to holding a team or a player accountable and the team accountable kind of goes under the umbrella of a team is only as strong as its weakest link and every kid needs to do their part. If one player loses, then the team loses. That collective punishment approach can be useful from time to time, although I recommend being careful with it. It can be useful because it helps to connect a player and their bad decision with the effect it has on their teammates and the team itself. This is so key for life. That lose-lose approach. I know this sounds backwards, but stay with me here. When players screw up and they do something, they do some kind of like loser behavior, or their attitude or their actions are a loss. They're losing. The team loses. It's a lose-lose. Just like everything can be a win-win, things will be a lose-lose in many cases. And I think it's important as coaches to use collective punishment from time to time or for certain things so kids can become better adults, better teammates, better people, because they see the connection between their actions, their bad decisions, their poor decisions, and the effect it has on their teammates and those around them. I think that's an interesting part of the flip side of the win-win is the lose-lose approach. Hey, if you lose, if this player loses or shows a loser type of behavior, then everybody's going to lose. And that's how families work a lot of times. That's how the world works in a lot of ways. Bad decisions by one can affect everybody. So I think it's important that we connect that and show players how that works on a baseball field. So when they get older and it really matters and it's really important and it might be vital to a family or a business, they've learned that lesson. A couple more here. Another example of the win-win on a youth baseball team is encouraging players to lift up and support their teammates, because when a player shares a tip, strategy, or positive comment, compliments, praise, in turn, the other player, their teammates will play better, almost undoubtedly, and the team will win more games. I generally believe players will feel better about themselves by doing this also, and their teammates will feel better about themselves, and in most cases, the team is going to have more success. So it's a win-win-win. Now, some of you might be thinking to yourself, Coach Bo, what about competitions where there's a winner and a loser? We're at practice. Should we have competitions where there's a winner and a loser? This is why I'm not a big fan, I should say, of defaulting to competitions where there's a single loser, where there's a winner and an isolated loser. I'm a big fan of competitions. I'm a huge fan of competing, but I'm a big fan, huge proponent of the team or a group within the team going up against the clock, a stopwatch. I'm also a big fan of grouping up the team and having competitions on a group level, so there's not an isolated loser. But I'm not against competitions. Kids need to learn that a loss is not the end of the world. They need to learn how to deal with loss. So as I wrap this up, this is my last main message that I want to share. We shouldn't try to avoid loss. So we think win-win, right? We want to think win-win, but we should not try to avoid all loss. Life is not going to be without loss, without failure. So I don't think we should teach or create an environment where there's no loss, where there's no failure. So I'm not against competitions where there is a loser. And at the end of the day, a loss can go down as a win in the growth category. One of the best teachers in life is failure. And on the flip side, many people say, and I think this does happen in human nature, winning breeds contentedness. So winning can keep a team or promote teams being content with where they're at and not growing, not getting better. They already say, hey, we're winning. We're all good. We don't need to get better. So a loss can be motivation. A loss could also be synonymous with failure or failing. And one of the best teachers in life is failure. So I do think at the end of the day, when it comes to loss, we need to shine a positive light on failure, on losing, and turn it into a productive thing, a positive thing, and not think of loss as an endpoint, but simply a step to raising up our game. So I hope there was 3 things that you got out of this habit number 4 discussion, think win-win, that were different and helped grow your perception of the habit 4 think win-win paradigm. 1, it's almost always more than win-win, that residual winning. 2, along with win-win, loss can be good. The loss can be a good lesson for players that their bad decisions, their poor decisions can cost those around them, a lose-lose situation. And we shouldn't avoid all losing. It's part of life. It's part of life. We shouldn't run from it. We should embrace it and change the perception of it. All right, I hope you enjoyed this take on habit number 4, along with that Daily Dad article, Coach Valvano, just a golden message and something that can really help shape our paradigm to be better coaches, better parents. Next week, I'm going to talk about King Richard. And no, not any old English king. We're going to talk about King Richard. There's a movie and the learning point from it, the message from it that I think we can all learn from. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend you go watch King Richard. I don't agree with the entire movie, but there are 2 or 3 golden nuggets of coaching wisdom, of parenting wisdom in that movie. So we'll hit on that. Next week, I have a Hall of Fame pitcher that all of you know, and the quote from this player, from this pitcher, that can help us coach up our pitchers to be better using this mindset. And of course, habit number 5 of the highly effective coaching series next week, coming straight to you next Tuesday. In the meantime, go get that drill design guide if you haven't already. It's a 21-page PDF emailed to you immediately. The drill design guide shapes your paradigm or what parts a high quality drill needs to have and should have. You can follow me on Twitter, 8020_baseball. You can support the podcast, leave a review, leave a rating. And I appreciate those of you that already have done that. And email me your success stories. Send it over, Coach Bo at 8020baseball.com. Until next week, take care of yourself, take care of your health, take care of your families, and take this information out there and use it. Like I always say, education does nothing for anybody. Knowledge does nothing for anybody. Information does nothing at all unless you implement it, unless you go use it, unless at a minimum go test it, try it, put it into action. Action is where things happen. So take this out there, put it in, use it. You will have success, sometimes fast, like Coach Jay when we talked about his drill implementation last week, sometimes a little slower, but you will have a lot more success. But the only way you can have success is by learning and then using, learning and then doing, learning and then implementing. Love being here with all of you. I look forward to next week. And until then, adios.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.